let's get that started again. We are live, and this is what you normally know as the World Map podcast. And we come to you typically live each week, every Sunday afternoon, Eastern time, for those who are in the U.S. And we do a live show, myself and my co-hosts, and that goes up on iTunes and Stitcher, as well as on our website, worldmapcast.com, every Sunday. We post that fully edited live show with all the fun music and bumpers that you love, or if you prefer the raw video experience, you can watch us live every week, and you can also check us out on YouTube. Just search World Map Podcast, and every episode is there in video format as well, if you prefer that over something like iTunes or listening on our website. But tonight, we're debuting something new that we're going to try. We've got some new equipment. Should have a little bit better sound quality. And wanted to try to give you something a little new, a little bit of video content that's kind of chunked out, a little bit shorter, not a full-length podcast. Just talk to you for a few minutes about one specific topic. So this is map key number 1. And I'll just say, as folks are joining the show, and we're getting more and more live viewers here during the live show, if anyone has questions or comments, feel free to ask those. I've got the Q&A panel up, and we'll just do those in real time. But what I want to talk about tonight is this right here. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ghostbusters. And this is a crossover comic book that came out issue by issue. So this is a trade paperback collection of several comic book issues put out by IDW Publishing late last year, early this year. So the collection here came out in, I believe, April of this year, so in the spring. So it's a relatively new collection of comics. I finally got my hands on it. I finally read through it last night. And I had read the first issue, was very intrigued, was very much looking forward to seeing how this series pans out, because, look, any kid who grew up in the 80s or even early 90s, I don't know how you could do that without being a Ghostbusters and or Ninja Turtles fan. So, and if you're like I was when I was a kid, you probably had Ninja Turtles living in your Ghostbusters house. And then, you know, I had the fire station tower and the goo that ran down through it and made a mess. So you probably already played out this fantasy with action figures as a kid, if you grew up around the same time that I did. But so this was a great read. This comic was really cool, and I won't spoil anything. This is going to be a totally spoiler-free review of this comic, but I'll just give you a little background. Essentially what happened here, the way they explain the Ghostbusters and the Ninja Turtles being in the same world, is that there's some cross-dimensional teleportation that happens due to, of course, technology that Donatello has put together. And next thing you know, the Ninja Turtles wind up in an alternate version of New York City, which happens to be the version that the Ghostbusters live in. So they actually get followed there by some of their enemies. The Ghostbusters get involved due to the paranormal nature of some of those enemies who follow through that teleportational rift with the Ninja Turtles. And next thing you know, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are linked up with the Ghostbusters in a fight against these enemies. And it's really actually kind of cool how the story is introduced and how the bad guys in the story are introduced, because there are some ties to some more traditional Ninja Turtles villains in there, or at least one of them who kind of plays a role. And it actually really intrigued me right from the start because of how that was set up. And then, of course, once the two teams meet, it's just full-on witty banter and action from there on out. If you're wondering who else is in this comic book, this very much draws from some of the more recent Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters comic book works. So if you only really know the cartoons or the films, this will be slightly different for you. So for example, on the Ghostbusters team, you have the Ray, you have Egon, you have Peter Venkman, you have Winston Zeddemore, but you also have Kylie Griffin. So super fans of Ghostbusters will know who Kylie is. Janine is, of course, in there. And then on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles side, you've got Casey Jones in this story. And you also have April O'Neil, who is the scientist version April O'Neil, not the news reporter April O'Neil that we know from some of the other iterations of Ninja Turtles. So as you might imagine, that doesn't impact the story too much. They're still the characters that you know and love, regardless of what version of these characters you know. And there are just some really, really great lines in here. I actually wanted to find one of them and just read to you because it's just so ridiculously on point. And you know, if you think about it, these two teams have a lot in common. You know, they both have kind of the nerd of the team, right? You got Donatello, you got Egon, although Ray Stans is a pretty big nerd too, right? You have the kind of the brooding, one, Peter Venkman and Raphael, and then you have, the solemn, level-headed leader in Leonardo. And one interesting thing that this comic points out, even though, Peter or Ray might be considered typically the leader of the Ghostbusters, Winston really is the one who is more level-headed and calm throughout things and kind of approaches things more practically sometimes. And so he's kind of aligned with Leonardo in this story, which is an interesting twist that kind of had me thinking, about these characters. But here's the one line that I wanted to show off, and obviously you won't be able to read this too well, in the camera here, but really interesting conversation between Peter Venkman and Raphael. And this is after Donatello and Ray are having this conversation about dimensional rifts and how the Ninja Turtles ended up there. And Venkman asks Raphael, he says, "Oh, so you have one like that too, huh?" And Raphael replies, "Well, at least it's just one." And Venkman says, "You got me there." So, a little joking around there that, the Turtles have to put up with Donatello's being a huge nerd, but poor Peter Venkman has to put up with Ray and Egon being big nerds around him all the time. So just some really funny jokes in here, along with the action and the great fictional story that's in here, the paranormal story mixed with ninjas. I mean, you mix ghosts and ninjas, what more do you need? But what I liked about this is that the characters, as you know them as a fan, are very accurately represented. There's a lot of fan service in here, and you'll see the characters talking to each other and interacting with each other in exactly the ways that you would expect. As I was reading this, I could hear, the voices from the Ninja Turtles cartoons in their various iterations. I could hear Leonardo saying something. I could hear Raph saying something. And I think that speaks a lot to how well written this is, how true it is to the characters when it just feels so natural. And I could almost really hear this in my mind and envision this as an actual, if Saturday morning cartoons had mixed these two together, which I think there was an anti-drug cartoon little mini series back in the 90s that actually did have Michelangelo in it with a lot of other cartoon characters, and I believe the Ghostbusters were in that. But it's just so good how accurately represented the characters are. The story follows kind of the format that you would expect from Ghostbusters and Ninja Turtles. But it's very interesting. It's kept me turning the pages. I read the whole thing in one sitting. Of course, you can see it's, only about probably 5 or 6 standard comic book issues long, which isn't that long. So I highly recommend this. I'd give it probably a 7 to 8 out of 10. My only problem really at all with this is I was a little disappointed in how it lost some connection to the way the story was introduced. I mentioned that there's a pivotal moment right at the beginning where we're actually time traveling to the past, and one of the all-time, bad Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle characters, villains, shows up and actually is helping out some of the lesser-known villains in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and seems like there's going to be this kind of power play there, some influence going on that I had hoped later on we would see emerge. We'd see this major villain emerge towards the end, and we'd find out that he or she was sort of behind all of this. And we never got that connection. So it fell a little flat at the end because things were resolved a little too much in a vanilla way. And it really didn't come back and connect to the beginning of the story and have that really cool ultimate resolution that I thought it would have. I thought it would have, given the way that the content was written, the way that the characters were so accurately portrayed, and how much fan service is in here, I thought that they would bring that back and really pay that off at the end. And it didn't so much do that, but I still feel like this was a really great read. So recommend it. Get your hands on this. It's pretty cheap on Amazon, and it's the trade paperback. It's just called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ghostbusters by IDW, and highly recommend you go and check this one out. If you're a fan of either Ninja Turtles or Ghostbusters, you're absolutely going to love it. And if you're not a fan of either of those things, this is probably a good way to get started. Get an introduction to both of them early on. So this has been the Map Key, episode 1 of the Map Key. This is a short video series that I'm going to be doing. My name is Josh, and I host the World Map podcast along with my co-hosts. Every Sunday, we do a live show right here on Google Hangouts on Air that you can watch and participate in. And if you missed that, we are on iTunes and Stitcher and other platforms. So thank you very much for watching, and you can check us out online at worldmapcast.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at worldmapcast. And hey, if you like the show, if you like this video content, this shorter content, go check out our real show, the World Map Podcast, and give us those iTunes reviews. Really appreciate it. That'd be great. And give us feedback, worldmapcast@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Poppin' Smoke.